looking on several part series, looking at the history of the Jews of Monastir in Macedonia. I think it's actually written with the help of Rabbi Shlomo Albahar. Actually, I'm not too sure if he's a rabbi or not, but he's given an excellent, detailed, let's just say very, very detailed article within regards to this. It's going to be a few part series. So over here is more of an introduction which he has written, which I'm saying over, where I'm not going to read the entire preface. There was a preface to it, but we're going to look about let's say, explore 16th century Macedonia. There's an interesting introduction to this section, which says from early times until the end of World War I. So we're going to start it now, 1918, naturally, that would have been. Now, the name of the city, Monastir, which is in Macedonia, it is also Bitola in Serbian, or Bitojla. It came from the Slavic word Obtij, which means the people of the monastery. Now, I think in Turkish, Monastir means monastery, and in Armenian the word is Tol Monastir. Now in Jewish literary it is called Monastiri over here. It is a town at the foot, let's say, of the Perista mountain, whose peak reaches 2,001 meters above sea level, north of the Kail-Bura mountains in the Pelagonio Valley in Macedonia. Now, the existence of the Jewish community during the period of Alexander the Great, that was between 328 to 356 before Common Era, I believe, we deduce from a story that is told of a Jewish soldier, one of Aristotle's pupils, named Meshulam. Which was a common Jewish name, I think, at the time in Monastir, as a first name, if I'm not mistaken, and also as a surname. This man was, let's say, a decorated soldier in Alexander's army because of the ties to the bow and the arrow, it's reported over. When the priest of his platoon stooped in order to watch a fight that was about to come in order to foretell the future, he shot and killed a bird. His friends resented this, but he simply replied, "How can this bird predict your future?" If he did not know, even now, let's say, know about the arrow aimed at him, had he known, he would have flown a different route. Now, there was an apostle, someone named Paul. His name was Shaul Hatarsi. He visited, it's reported over many cities in Macedonia, here reading this article. During his journeys, especially between 67 Common Era, he visited Philippi. I think when we don't use the New Testament, but this article is quoting this over here. It records he left Napolis for Philippi, a city in Macedonia inhabited by the Romans. We stayed there several days. Paul and the Silas passed through this Amepiphios, Apollonio, and Thessaloniki, where there was a synagogue, as was his custom. So Paul joined the Jews, and on 3 Shabbats he gave sermons on topics from Bible. I'm just reciting over what the article is saying over here. Now, Jews lived in Macedonia in the year 40 Common Era. That year, 2 Jewish delegations went from Alexandria, Egypt, and from Jerusalem to Rome. They tried to convince Caesar Gallus Caligula to cancel his plans for erecting, let's say, a statue in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Now, Philo, head of the delegation from Alexandria, included in his book the letter from Agrippas I, king of Judea, to Gallus, describing the Jews in the Roman towns, including, let's see, Azalia, Boyita, Macedonia, and others. Now, there's direct evidence regarding Jewish settlement in the area was found in 1930 by someone named Stoby Diggs near Monastir. The Yugoslavian archaeologist, someone of the name Zosi Petrovic, found a column for a 3rd century synagogue, which contained an engraving showing that the place was dedicated to the Jewish community by Claudius Tiberius Polchamos, who earned the nickname pictured over the synagogue. Mormorstein thinks that, let's say, Polishamios' ancestors were among the slaves that Claudius Caesar released when he left Rome for Macedonia in the middle of the 1st century. Now, there was a man named Benjamin Ben Yonah from Tudela, traveled the world, I think, from the 1100s at one stage in time, and especially, I think, the Jewish settlement of Saloniki, I think, in the 12th century, and wrote from there, Bishina, to the city of Saloniki, built by King Seleucus. There's a big city where about 500 Jews live, all engaged in trades. At the time of Benjamin of Tudela, Saloniki had more Jews than any other city in Greece at that point now. He also mentions the city of Christopoli on the way, let's say, from Saloniki to Constantinople, bordering Macedonia and the Thrace. In his book of the Jews of the Balkans, there's a person named Marin Friedenberg, states that during the 13th century, Jews had a tendency, as Jewish people, to settle along the Via Egnatia. Among these cities was Monastir. Now, I think in his opinion, it's quoted over here, the city of Monastir could serve as an example of the colonization of Jews in Macedonia, since it is situated on the main route from Saloniki in Greece to Doris, now Albania, on the Adriatic coast. Now, he himself is going to testify that in 1929, a sign was put up on the fence of the cemetery in Monastir listing the years 1457 to 1929. He saw this evidence to, let's say, the existence of Jewish community, although small, 5 years after the deportation from Spain. Over here, we'll continue the article over here. Now, he's talking about the years between 1361 to 1400. He speaks about the Ottoman Sultanate conquered Bulgaria, but also conquered Macedonia. Let's say Thessaly and Carmen, from 1381 to 1382, they occupied Monastir and made it into, let's say, a fortress for protection against the Albanians, and controlled it until 1912. That was a huge period of 530 years. They had major influence on the city, and obviously will affect the Jewish community, let's say, spiritual and economic life, as well as, let's say, self-esteem of people, aspirations, customs, dress style, and nature of trades by which they made their livelihoods. This was a traditional Jewish community that saw itself as Turkish and demonstrated loyalty to the Turkish authority until, let's say, Macedonian rebellion in 1903. Many Jews took part in rebellion, showing for the first time resistance to the Turkish authority until, let's say, its demise during the Balkan Wars, especially between 1912 to 1914, 1914 to 1918. I think from the Boris occupation in 1324, and especially the capture of Constantinople by Mehmet II in 1453, many Jews would emigrate to Germany, France, all these places. They also came from different places in Italy, Sicily, or Turno. And some of these Jews, let's say, came to Monastir and taught, let's just say, on those places. I think in the course of time, they were absorbed into local society and abandoned their customs and languages, praised in local synagogues, and would go on speak Ladino at that point in time. Now, in 1471, Rabbi Yitzchak Zorafati, he called to all the Jewish communities to come to the area under Ottoman rule. And in 1460, the Ottomans expelled the Jews from cities near Monastir, Skopje, Orchid, Prilip, and Strip, and brought them to Constantinople during a forced, let's say, over here, Surgum exile. Now, we can assume the article is saying that the exiles included the Jews of Monastir, who numbered at that point in time 480 Jewish families in that year. There is much material about the Jewish community that began in the 16th century, let's just say, ended in the months March to April 1943. There are records from travelers, certificates from the Turkish courts, and from the rabbinical responsa. Starting in the 19th century, there was consular reports, Jewish and non-Jewish press archives in Israel and other countries, and articles and books written in many languages about Macedonia, mainly on Monastir and its Jews. Now the article is going to speak, which you've done very good, brilliant, detailed article within regards to Macedonian history. He's going to speak about the 16th century Macedonia. In the beginning of the century, of the 16th century, Turkish and Venetian travelers described Monastir as a flourishing city with impressivity, large and beautiful public buildings, houses, hotels for caravans, a covered market with an iron gate. There was a tremendous town square for exhibitions. The commerce in the city flourished at that point in time. Inhabitants of the city dealt in grains, wool, animal skins, and cotton. There was Evliya Kalebi. He found 3,000 houses, 900 stores, 40 cafes, and 70 mosques in the city. Monastir also served as an Islamic religious center for all the Balkans. The city had a religious Islamic school and a school for judges. This was written. Under the Ottoman rule, the city grew from 480 families in 1460 and to about 845 in 1521. There was 640 Muslim families and 205 non-Muslims. According to the census, whose date was not recorded, but let's say known to have taken place in the days of Sultan Suleiman the Great, 1520 to 1566. There were 43 Jewish families and 6 unmarried women. By the year 1529, there were 60 Jewish families, 27 unmarried women. More Jews, let's say, came from the city of Avelina in Albania. These were Jews from Catalonia, Spain, that settled in Avelina, but because of, let's say, harsh climate, soon moved to Monastir. Now, there's a great Rabbi Yosef David Ben Lev. He was born in Monastir, I think, in the year 1502. He would go on to leave for Saloniki and became the head of the Jewish High Court. He was well known as a person who fought the rich of the city who were exploiting the poor. Because of this, I think his sons were executed and were forced to flee to Istanbul. So, yeah, I think there was Maren Friedenberg reported that in the 1520s there was a notable immigration of Jews to Monastir. At the same time, obviously, there was a fake messiah, Shlomo Molcho. Diego Perez was active and wrote his book, the Sefer HaMefoar, in which he, I think, prophesizes, let's just say, that in inverted commas we use, that the year 1540 will be the year of the Messiah's coming. He joined a group of Jews led by David Ruveni, who wanted to bring about the signing of a military agreement with Portugal and with the Pope to organize a militaristic expedition against Turkey in order to free the land of Israel from Muslims. Now, I think come the year 1536, the Portuguese Inquisition was formed and many Jews would actually flee for their lives to the Ottoman Empire. I think some of them went actually eventually to Monastir, as we mentioned before. Now, come September the 5th, 1539, Baruch Cohen from Ragoza, I think Drobovnik, he sold 750 litres of cinnamon, 1,800 pounds of muscat, 450 litres of pepper, 234 beef skins for a sum of a total of 2,378.50 ducats to Moshe Shuriel, a Jewish person from Monastir. We see from this that the Jews of Monastir dealt in spices and animal hides, and that their commerce reached as far as Ragoza. From a question brought before, there was a rabbi named Rabbi Shmuel D. Medina. It appears that the Jewish people of Monastir had slaves in those days. On July the 15th, 1550, Shmuel Avi Meir from Monastir handed over a slave, one Frasico Mora, then 18 years old, to a dealer from Saloniki who lived in Venice. From this we see over here this evidence that the Jewish people of Monastir also had dealings in Venetians. Now the article continues, it says in 1559, due to the prevalence of Muslim slaves in the hands of Jews, and I can't really read the writing here because of the light, the Sultan is going to announce a decree that forbade Jews and Christians from maybe taking slaves. I'm not so sure. This includes the hiring, release slaves who wish to remain, I think, with their masters. I'm not too sure. I have to double check the article. From another question that was brought to Rabbi Shmuel de Medina, it is clear that in Macedonia there were cases of conversion to Islam because Jews of Monastir tried to influence a young Salonikian that had converted to change his mind and return to Judaism. In the middle of the 16th century, there were 2 major Jewish communities in Monastir, Aragon and Portugal. The relations between their neighborhoods were unfriendly, and they were referred to by their nicknames, the upper and the lower, the richer aristocratical society and the poorer society. The upper neighborhood paid 2/3 of the taxes to authorities, and the lower neighborhood only 1/3 of it. I think come with the year 1557, there was a Jewish person from Monastir that was murdered on his way home from Saloniki. It seems like there was a lot of commerce between the Jews of Monastir and the Jews of Saloniki. This included trade agreements regarding the sale of animal hides. In 1563, there was a Jewish dealer from Arta reported over with, let's say, cheaters associated from Monastir during an exhibition in Togril. This is what the article is saying. The Jew from Arta agreed to bring a purse of money that had been given to him by the Jewish person in Monastir. However, the Jewish person from Arta claimed that the money was stolen from him by robbers on the way. The judges of the city were Joseph Arusiti and Joseph Bechar, Shlomo Adgrish and Judah Al-Haki. This proves that, from the article, that the Jews from Monastir attended exhibitions and made commercial contacts with cities in Greece. I think it's reported over that year the Cadi of Monastir received an open, an order to investigate allegations according to which Jews sold wine to Muslims, which obviously I think their religion will forbid. Mid-16th century, we see Rabbi Ben Avram HaKohen serve as a rabbi of Monastir. Even though he moved to Saloniki, several of the religious decisions were connected to Jews from Monastir over here. I think Jews of Monastir would live in a special neighborhood over there, and there was no wall around the neighborhood, but the houses were built in such a way to defend their tenants. The neighborhood was also called a big yard, the Yehudi Hain, or the El Corretigio in Spanish. These special quarters specifically for ethnic groups, let's just say. Not only Jews were not unusual in the areas controlled by Ottomans. The Ottomans established quarters like these for Jews in the cities. Wala, Castoria, Yanina, Larissa, Shas, Komotini, Monastir, Plubadabib, Adrina, Skopje, and Sofia. A list of, let's say, Jewish dealers from Dubrovnik, Ragoza, from the year 1572 was found. And if their trades were specified, Sasson Nachman from Monastir was listed, let's say, as a dealer in the clothes and weapons. The trade in weapons was unusual because according to Omer's decree, a Jew was forbidden to carry weapons, let alone deal in them. Apparently, the Jews' commerce in weapons was in Christian countries, far away from the eyes of the Ottoman sultans over here. Now, just to continue this article, we'll do a few more minutes and we'll call it a day, just this introduction. During those years, many, let's say, Anusim, forced converts who returned to Judaism, fled Portugal and moved to Monastir. A question was brought to the local religious court regarding a disagreement about inheritance between two brothers from Portugal. Matkovsky found that the escape of these converted Jews from Portugal began in 1568. And let's say that many of them succeeded in smuggling their assets and immigrating to cities of Macedonia. They were erudite, literate, and much richer than the local Jews over there. In the year 1575, there was a disagreement now that will break out between leaders of the community and their cantor, let's just say. As mentioned, there were two communities over there, Aragon and Portugal. They had agreed upon joint management of a general fund from which the salaries of the religious leaders, cantors, teachers, butchers, and the religious needs of the communities would be paid. Now, the communities employed two cantors, one of which served both synagogues alternately. From here we see that there was no considerable difference, if any, in the wording and the style of the prayers in both. Now, come on, the 1580s now, there was a result of all this. There was a flow of money from silver mines in America. The value of silver, I think, at that point depreciated compared to gold at the rate of 70%, because the Ottoman currency was based on silver. The depreciation caused inflation that disrupted the economy and brought a reduction of earnings from exports and a rise in costs of imports. Come with the year 1582, the Sultan is going to publish a decree because of indigenous Muslims who claimed that Jews had jurisdiction over them concerning taxes. At that same year, an agreement was reached between Jewish dealers from Monastir and their brethren in Belgrade over here. Albania not to participate in the Istroga exhibition on Rosh Hashanah, I think the Jewish New Year, obviously, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, or on the holiday of Sukkot. From here, we see that because of the difficulties of making a livelihood, the Jewish leaders were in habit of, unfortunately, desecrating the Chagim, the holidays, but now had, let's say, recanted and returned to observing the holidays. Now, we're going to see in the year 1589, the Jews from Monastir vowed to move together to the land of Israel. They were compelled to annul the vow because the currency was deviated and Turkish debtors were unable to, let's say, repay their debts. This would obviously show that Monastrian Jews were also in the business of money lending. And come on, at the end of the 16th century, 1591, 7 elders from Jerusalem admonished, I think, the members of the court and the leaders of the Jewish community of Monastir because of acting improperly, let's just say, with regard to one of the Jews, someone named David Nachmias, who lent money to another Jew in the city. The borrower over here, he refused to recognize his debt and even enlisted 2 false witnesses that testified against the leader. When the court, let's say, accepted the testimony, David Nachmias was compelled to leave the city, let's say, not in honor, and to move to Jerusalem. Travelers from Venice that visited Monastir reported that in the city, 1,500 houses, of these 250 were owned by Jews. Many Jews prefer to rent houses rather than buy it in order to avoid the payment of taxes that homeowners have to pay. The traveler Lorenzo Bernardo visited Monastir in 1591, where Rabbi Shmuel Nachmias told, let's say, him that the city only had 200 Jewish families. In 1595, the Sultan Murad III forbade the Jews from wearing silk garments or other expensive clothes or jewelry. From this we see that the Jews weren't able to wear fancy clothes, a fact that seemed to bother the Muslim residents. Very interesting. This is the first section of the article, really talking about the more 1500s over here, examining the life in Macedonia, and very, very interesting. Remember, if you recollect, I think it was only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we recorded a video on the history of an in-depth long video on the history of the Jews from the Netherlands, from Holland. So this is an excellent article which I found on the internet on the Jews of Macedonia. So this is going to be a few-part series over here. Maybe it's going to go on to 4 or 5 parts where we're going to go around what happened all the centuries at that stage in time in those different locales, and go in the breadth of it and learn about the entire science, let's just say, behind what actually occurred during that period of time. So very, very exciting. And friends, I recommend everyone please subscribe to the channel. We are coming close at the moment to a staggering 7,000 subscribers. We are a community that's learning about, let's say, great rabbis of yesteryear. We're trying to explore the science behind many of the great rabbonim, especially from the Ottoman countries, from North African countries, from Spanish territories. And we've already recorded about 1,200 biography videos on different great rabbis. What we also do on this channel is we travel around different parts of Israel. We do different tours, which I recommend everyone to watch. We like to go to different places and visit and grow and learn with regards to our Jewish heritage. And we do a lot of Israel advocacy. There's another exciting project that we're doing. We film with a different personality every single day, some inspiration with regards to a Torah message or a message for Israel. So I can't recommend enough for everyone to subscribe and share the videos also to other people. I'm wishing you all a great day. Take care and thanks for watching.